Welcome to another round of coffee and donuts. If you don't know who I am, I'm Frank. I'm the director of training here at Armageddon, and this is where I answer your police hiring questions or your questions about becoming a law enforcement officer. Let's discuss. Before we get started, if you want to send us over a question, there's multiple different ways to do it. We answer every question on our social platforms, starting with YouTube and then going from there. But additionally, we have our new blog, and you can see that on our website at armageddonct.com. If you scroll to the bottom of our blog, you'll see a question comment section where you can ask your questions there as well, and you can even ask them in a private function if you would like. Also, you can message us in our website on one of our contact cards. Now, 3 pre-submitted questions. Let's get into them. First one, I'm in the background process and I realize I haven't changed my address in a few years and moved each year into a new apartment. I previously didn't understand the difference between mailing and residential addresses, or that you must update your ID in 30 days. I updated my background application and corrected the address through the DMV. Is there a way I can articulate my mistake? Yeah, this is a situation I see commonly, and sometimes it's an issue, sometimes it's not. It really just depends on the background investigator. And really what it comes down to, and what I found, is this is kind of your get out of jail free card if this is really the only mistake you made. So let me explain this a little bit more. If you are in a situation where you haven't updated your driver's license, first of all, by law you're required to. You're supposed to update your driver's license within 30 days of a new address. And that is for legal reasons, if you get stopped, so they can properly mail you or notify you of, a court appearance or any type of legal requirement for updating. So this in itself could be considered a crime by some point in some states, and I'm not going to deep dive into this one, but that could be your, hey, now is this the crime of the century? No. Is this something that would immediately DQ you? Probably not. But if it's something that's not accurate now, it will have an impact on your hiring process, and I've seen it. Some background investigators are just really cool about it, and they say, hey, just get this taken care of, before we finish this hiring process. Others are will deep dive into it, like, why didn't you do this? And then they're going to say, well, this shows irresponsibleness. There we go, got the word out. So it could be a toss-up as to what type of hiring officials you get, or if they're even in a bad mood that day. What I would do for articulating this is, you kind of already said it. It's just say, hey, this was a situation. Unfortunately, I was unaware. As soon as I was made aware of the situation, I immediately corrected it and rectified the situation. However, I have provided all the updated and accurate information on my background packet or my PHS. That's how I would articulate it. Anything past that, and you're just giving perspective, right? You just say, hey, I was unaware at the time. I realize now that was an issue. I corrected the issue, and I've been accurate and up to date on all my documentation. If you say that, that's your best chances of moving forward past this. And this is not meant to scare anyone, I have seen background investigators DQ a candidate for something like this. I've seen background investigators think this is the most petty thing in the world. It just depends. Right? I've seen background investigators use this as the stepping stone and as to, additional stuff and kind of probing a little bit deeper. So keep that in mind. Next question. I've lived here for 14 years and just got my green card last year. Congratulations on that, by the way. Awesome. Happy for you. No prior professional employment history because I didn't have papers. How badly will that affect me? I have interviews with 2 agencies next week. It will affect you. Right? Because, they're going to say, have you ever committed a crime? Now, let me caveat this, right? That's not a blanket statement. It's also going to depend on what state you're applying. Certain states are more forgiving than other states, right? And I'm not going to go down the list because, once again, even departments in that state might have different opinions on what it is. But typically, certain states are more forgiving about this than other states. Now that everything is legal and good to go, you said you got your green card last year, so hopefully you at least have 1 year of professional employment history. But employment history is a big critical factor, and if you say that I did work, it was just off the books, now you have to list the person that employed you off the books, and that's a crime too. And most of the time, they're not going to be willing to hang themselves out to dry just so you can get a job in law enforcement. So, and I'm just being realistic here. So just kind of, this is the real world, right? That's just most likely what's going to happen. I'm going to say for how badly will it affect you, it depends on what state you're applying in. That's going to be my overall consensus with this question. As for the interviews, be prepared to articulate it. The reason for coming here, getting your green card, establishing. Now, a lot of times, if you're in works for getting your green card, you usually have some type of temporary asylum or some type of temporary access. I think you might be misarticulating this or misselling. So I would go back and see, hey, did I have proper authority to be here and then to work, but I just was still employed under that's a tough one, right? But I would go back and see, well, no, I did have this access, this temporary access, or this visa, right, to be here, while trying to attempt to get my green card, because usually it's just not overnight that you can get a green card. So, yeah, I think you might be better off than you think on this one, but you're going to have to look into it and do a little bit more research. All right. Next one. How would working for free to keep a family business afloat, obviously not working under the books to avoid taxes, this would also need to be in your personal history statement, I assume. So what I'm understanding from this question is, how would it look if you were actually employed with a family business, but you were not being compensated? So I've had this with a couple of members, and it's really hard to sell. Now, if you're self-employed and you're saying, hey, I didn't take a distribution or a salary due to the fact that the company couldn't afford it, from a legal standpoint, there's nothing wrong with that. From an evaluation standpoint, with hiring officials and becoming a law enforcement officer, they might not actually consider that employment, right? They might not consider that you're actually employed. A lot of times these small businesses will take distributions or will just, kind of mingle their money and their assets between their personal and their business. That's fine. But if you think about if you ever had to do that and you ever had to go get a bank loan and stuff like that, you're not showing them a W-2 anymore. You're showing them your entire books of your business. And a lot of times, if you write off a lot of things to show less of an income, right, legitimate write-offs, and you try to say, hey, I made $100,000 last year with my business, but then it costs you $80,000 to run your business, a bank would look at it and say, okay, you only make $20,000. Well, that's the same way law enforcement would look at it as well. And it's a lot harder they're not going to go in and do a full-on depth analysis of that. They're going to want it crystal clear, showed up, and they're going to probably ask for your tax returns to prove that. And that's what banks do as well. So for this one, your issue might come, as I've seen in the past with other candidates, that they don't actually consider it employment, which could hurt you because they could say, hey, you technically in our eyes have been unemployed, even though you haven't. But because you're not actually being compensated, they might just say, hey, this is just volunteer work, and we don't count volunteer experience as employment experience. I'm not saying that will always happen. I'm just saying it could happen, and I've seen that happen in the past where individuals, were employed by the family as a primary caregiver, and they actually received compensation in the form of family or living expenses, right? And it was all documented, but certain departments didn't consider that employment. So depends on what the family business is, and then you're not getting any type of pay. That's another issue. Now, if the company is making a profit and you're the primary owner, you are getting paid, right? Especially depending on how you have the company legally structured, and that would be the conversation I would have with you on a one-on-one call, where I would say, hey, are you just misarticulating yourself here, and you just need to better articulate yourself when you go for the interviews or for the background packet or the PHS when you're filling that out for the review. You'd be surprised how many times someone just misarticulate based on the actual facts of the situation. So I would look into that too and just say, hey, I'm the owner of the business, right? It is a family business, but I'm a shareholder. I'm the owner of the business. I don't draw a salary, but I do have access to these funds for personal use, and that's my compensation. It's just not a salary or an hourly wage. You might still have a wage. You just are going to have to articulate it properly. Okay. Once again, I hope this helps. This was 3 really good questions. If you want your questions answered, submit them over to us. I highly recommend submitting them over to us on the blog, for the sheer fact that the blogs are a very simple read, and it is going into so much more detail, and we're expounding our actual topics there. We're covering the police academy, we're covering FTO, and I want to see your feedback. Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down in there. You can just click the button. Let us know which type of information you want us to do these longer videos on. Hope this helps. Stay safe, and I will see you next time.